The Earl and the Untamed. Full audiobook, Hearts Untamed. Book 3, Prologue, England. 1794. The candle flickered one last time before dying out. The room was swallowed by shadows, lit only by the dying glow of the fireplace. The easel still held the unfinished painting, a young woman's face, her eyes covered by a velvet blindfold. "Are you certain, my lord?" the painter asked, his hands stained with oil and fear. "As certain as I am that this woman no longer exists," the nobleman replied, dropping a heavy pouch onto the table. "No one must ever know she was here." The artist hesitated. The commission wasn't just to erase the background, it was to cover an entire section that, in his eyes, held something else. A different stroke. A hidden message. And what if someone tries to uncover it? The nobleman gave him a cold smile. "Then make sure they can't." The door shut behind him, and silence returned. But the painter did not fully obey. Instead of destroying what he was ordered to hide, he concealed it, layer by layer, stroke by careful stroke. A disguised signature, a veiled symbol, and beneath the lady's gown, a painted letter, written in coded language. Outside, the storm intensified, and the truth remained trapped within the canvas. Waiting. London. Winter of 1814. Many years later, the painting would resurface, and fall into the hands of Julieth Cavendish, unaware that in restoring it, she would remove more than just varnish and dust. She would uncover secrets capable of changing everything. Welcome to Whispers by Maga Audiobooks. Make yourself comfortable, the magic is about to begin. Sparkles. Chapter 1, The Commission. "A count wants you to restore a painting in his estate?" Isabella asked, frowning as she held the letter. Julieth shrugged, leaning casually against the window frame. "That's what it says. And he seems to be in a bit of a hurry." "And how on earth did the Earl of Blackmoor hear about you?" "That's exactly what I've been wondering," Julieth replied, her gaze still fixed on the winter gardens of Rivington Hall. "Though I suppose you know more about the nobility than I do." "Have you heard of him?" "Only rumors," Isabella murmured, placing the letter on the table. "Thorne Blackmoor is the youngest son of the Duke of Marlington. He inherited the earldom after the death of an eccentric uncle who had no heirs. They say he's unconventional." "Unconventional?" "That's a very polite way of saying scandalous. Which is exactly why I don't like the idea of you getting involved." Julieth smiled. "I'm not getting involved with him, just with his painting." "Are you sure about that?" "As sure as I am that I won't be spending the season here embroidering handkerchiefs for guests." Isabella burst into laughter, though there was a hint of concern in her eyes. "Just promise me you'll be careful. There's something odd about this. A single earl, known for his libertine ways, hiring a young, intelligent, beautiful restorer with no chaperone, it's at least suspicious." Julieth leaned in and kissed her cheek. "Don't worry, sister. I can handle an earl. Even one with a questionable reputation." The following week, at Blackmoor Estate, the walls breathed antiquity. The ceiling was high, with dark oak beams, faded tapestries, forgotten books, and dusty chandeliers filled the space. But the painting, the one hanging above the main hall's fireplace, was what truly commanded attention. Julieth stood before it. The woman in the portrait had an unsettling beauty. Her serene expression, lips curved in an unreadable smile, and her eyes, they seemed to look far beyond the viewer. "What do you think?" asked a deep male voice behind her. She turned, and saw him. Thorne Blackmoor. Tall, elegant, yet disheveled, as if fine clothing was a necessary nuisance. Dark hair, strong jaw, and the calmest, most dangerously unreadable eyes she had ever seen. "The painting is intriguing," she said without hesitation. "Though I can't say the same for its condition." Thorne raised an eyebrow, amused. "Is that how you greet all your clients, Miss Cavendish?" "Only the ones who make me travel in the middle of winter to face a canvas abused by decades of neglect." He smiled. "I like your honesty. I didn't come to please you, my lord. I came to work." A heavy silence fell between them. "Then," he nodded, "then you're in the right place. My uncle had peculiar tastes, and even stranger secrets. This painting belonged to his first wife. No one knows who painted it or why he insisted it be hung here. But I want to preserve it, restore it, if possible. And if the damage is beyond repair?" Thorne held her gaze. "Some broken things still deserve a second chance, even if they don't seem like it." Julieth didn't look away. "I'll be the judge of that, once I see what lies beneath those layers of varnish." Without another word, she walked to the work table he had arranged for her. She unrolled her brushes, sharpened her scalpel, and placed her magnifying glass on the surface. As she prepared, Thorne watched her in silence. He wasn't entirely sure what lay beneath that painting, but he was starting to suspect that the restorer might be even more dangerous than the secret hidden beneath the canvas. Chapter 2: The Artist and the Rake. Julieth carefully removed the first layer of varnish. The scent of turpentine filled the air, along with the barely audible crackle of an old canvas that had spent years begging to be freed. Every brush stroke revealed felt like a word rescued from a forgotten letter. "This painting has something unsettling," she murmured to herself. "Do you often talk to paintings?" Thorne asked from across the room, lounging on a worn velvet armchair. She didn't turn around. "Only when they deserve it. And as this one? I'll decide when I'm done." "How bold. How impatient," she replied, pulling off her stained gloves and turning to him with one brow raised. "Don't you have anything better to do than watch me work?" "Oh, I do. But this is, by far, more entertaining." Julieth grabbed a fresh sheet from her notebook and started writing, ignoring him. "You don't need a restorer. You need a governess." Thorne let out a low, genuine laugh. "Heaven forbid." Silence. Then, he stood. "Tell me something, Miss Cavendish. Why did you take the commission?" She set the pen down. "Do you really want to know?" "Surprise me." "Because I was bored. Because I have no interest in spending the season sitting in an embroidery room pretending I don't have a brain. Because restoring an old painting is far more thrilling than chatting with a dozen ladies eager to marry me off to their nephews." "Is that enough?" Thorne looked at her for a moment, as if trying to determine whether she was being serious. "I find it refreshing." "And you?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Why hire a woman to restore something so valuable? Aren't you afraid of being judged?" He took a step toward her. "I've been judged for far worse, Miss Cavendish." "I don't doubt it." They both fell silent, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink to that dusty room, to that exchange of glances, where not even the thickest varnish could hide what was beginning to take shape. That night, alone in her room, Julieth reviewed her notes. The painting had layered coats, not just varnish. There was something else, a faint mark, almost imperceptible, beneath the neckline of the lady's gown. She ran her finger gently over the sketch she had copied. Something in the shape, the symmetry, it wasn't decorative. It was deliberate. A symbol. She closed the notebook, And for the first time since accepting the commission, she felt a different vibration in her chest. She wouldn't just be restoring a painting. She was about to unearth a secret. And perhaps get herself into something far greater than art. Chapter 3: The Hidden Mark. The third day of work began under a gray sky. And the room where the painting stood was colder than usual, despite the fire burning in the hearth. Julieth didn't seem to notice. Her sleeves were rolled up, her eyes focused behind the magnifying lens. Breath held. The brush barely touched the canvas, lifting fragments of varnish and grime. But there was one section that resisted. Too dark. Too even. She tilted her head, frowned, and picked up a fine scalpel. With steady hands, she gently scraped the surface. And her heart skipped a beat. Beneath what looked like a simple embroidered flower on the dress, she uncovered precise lines. Geometric ones. A figure that didn't belong to the original design. She removed another layer. And then she saw it. A seal painted in gold. Some sort of emblem. So delicate it looked scorched into the canvas rather than painted. "What are you?" she whispered. The sound of footsteps broke her focus. She covered the painting with a cloth and turned just in time to see Thorne walk in. "Hiding something, Miss Cavendish?" "Number more than usual," she replied, her face unreadable. Thorne approached, a glass of brandy in hand. "You've been rather quiet today." "I'm working." "Any interesting discoveries?" She hesitated a moment, then shook her head. "Not yet." "Pity," he murmured, sipping his drink. "The lady in the portrait seems to hold more secrets than beauty. And that's saying something." "Do you know who she was?" she asked, testing the waters. "Not exactly. The official story is that she was one of my uncle's former lovers. No one spoke much about her. Apparently, it was a tragic tale." "And what about the unofficial story?" Thorne smiled. "Just whispers. That she vanished. That she took her own life. That someone made sure she stayed silent. Family scandals, you know how it is." Julieth studied him in silence. She didn't fully believe him. "And still you chose to keep the painting." "Let's just say there are things I like to keep, even if I don't entirely know why." She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded and returned to her work. But this time, more cautiously. There was something Thorne wasn't saying. And whether she should trust or fear him, she didn't know yet. But part of her wanted to find out. Not just about the painting, but about the man who had ordered its restoration. That night, alone in her room, Julieth drew the symbol on a separate sheet of paper. It was elegant, ancient, perhaps a crest, perhaps a signature. She didn't yet know what it meant. But something in her gut told her not to speak of it. Not yet. Not until she understood what she was unearthing. Or who might want to stop her from doing it. Chapter 4: Echoes from the Past. The invitation had arrived that morning, with a handwritten note from Lady Arabella Fairfax. "Dear Thorne, I will not allow the isolation of Blackmoor to turn you into a hermit. Come to my soirée tonight. Bring your artist. I promise not to be scandalized." Does this happen often?" Julieth asked, reading the note while sipping her tea. "Being invited with veiled threats?" Thorne sighed from his armchair, his brow slightly furrowed. "Arabella is persistent. She's not used to being ignored." "Was she your lover?" "For a season or two." She gave him a pointed look. "How charming. Are you jealous?" "Jealous?" Julieth stood up. "I'm just concerned she won't know the difference between a restorer and your next conquest. And if she doesn't, then she'll have to get used to disappointment." That evening, At the Fairfax residence, the soiree was elegant. Too elegant. Women adorned in diamonds that could pay a year's rent. Men in embroidered waistcoats. With polished smiles and overflowing glasses. Everything reeked of perfume, ambition, and scrutiny. As Julieth walked in on Thorne's arm, the murmurs began instantly. She felt them prickle down her neck. Who is she? She doesn't have a title. They say she's a restorer. And why is she so close to him? Lady Arabella greeted them with a smile that never reached her eyes. Lord Blackmoor and Miss Cavendish. Is it? Julieth nodded politely. A pleasure. Lady Fairfax. Thank you for the invitation. Oh, the pleasure is mine. One doesn't often receive a woman of your talent. Her voice was sweet, but venom laced the corners of her mouth. I'm as intrigued by your work as I am by your presence. I hope the first will impress you. The second is irrelevant, Julieth replied without blinking. Arabella raised an eyebrow. Bold. Thorne stepped between them with a glass in hand. Isn't she delightful? Arabella shot him a look sharp as a dagger. Oh yes. And yet one can't help but wonder, what exactly is a young woman like her seeking at Blackmoor? The same thing I am, Julieth said before Thorne could answer. Answers. Silence. Tense. Then Arabella smiled like a well-fed panther. How intriguing. I do hope you find them. Though be warned, not all answers are pleasant. Later that night, far from prying ears, Thorne and Julieth stood alone by a large window. Regret coming? He asked. Not at all, she replied. I rather enjoy watching snakes in their natural habitat. Thorne chuckled softly, then leaned closer. Arabella doesn't let go of the past easily. Neither do I. But I don't play dirty. And if the game turns dangerous? Julieth held his gaze. Then I play better. Meanwhile, from a shadowed corner of the room, a man with a stern gaze observed in silence. He was dressed in black, with a cane he didn't truly need. His name, Lord Blackhurst, an old friend of the Blackmoor family, and the only one who knew what that painting was hiding. Or at least, part of it. When his eyes met Julieth's, she felt a sudden chill. As if she'd just stepped onto a minefield, without knowing it. Chapter 5 Echoes from Rivington Hall. That letter again? Asked Alexander, Duke of Rivington, as he poured a glass of sherry. Isabella looked up from her writing desk. Yes. Julieth doesn't mention anything unusual. She only writes about the restoration, her progress with the painting, and the terrible weather. But there's something she's not saying. And since when do you distrust your sister? Never. That's exactly why I notice it. Julieth has never kept things from me. Until now. Alexander walked over and handed her the glass. Maybe it's just focus. It's an important job. The Earl of Blackmoor is no ordinary man. Isabella took a thoughtful sip. He isn't. And what worries me most isn't him. It's what's hidden in that painting. Alexander raised an eyebrow. A painting? Yes. She says it once belonged to the first wife of the late Earl, a woman surrounded by rumors. No one knows much about her. Julieth mentioned a symbol she found beneath the layers of oil. She says she's looking into it. But something in the way she wrote about it felt forced. As if she was trying to distract me from the real discovery. Alexander sat across from her. Do you want me to send someone? Number. If there's anything we learned from what happened with Luciana and Reese, it's that stepping in too early can ruin everything. But I do want us to stay alert. You think Julieth's in danger? Isabella held the letter to her chest. I don't know. But I have a bad feeling. And when I do, I'm usually right. Alexander gave a slow nod. Then we'll proceed with caution. Should I reach out to the Earl of Ashbury? Isabella shook her head. Not yet. But if this gets worse, we'll need our allies. All of them. Back at Blackmoor Hall, Julieth stood once again in front of the painting. Completely alone. She peeled back another layer. And there it was. Clearer this time. The full symbol. A circle intertwined with an M. Crossed by a broken line. She recognized it. Didn't know from where. But she'd seen it before. Maybe in one of her mother's old books. Or in the documents she once found among Isabella's things. She closed her eyes for a moment. It wasn't just a decorative symbol. It was a seal. A message hidden within a work of art. And someone had gone to great lengths to cover it up. But why? And more disturbing still, for whom? Chapter 6 The Keeper of the Secret. Do you often wander galleries at midnight? Lord Blackhurst? Julieth asked without turning. Still cleaning the lower edge of the frame. The tall figure paused just a few steps behind her. I don't usually. But when a restorer insists on uncovering more than she should, it's worth watching closely. Julieth turned slowly. And what do you think I'm uncovering? My lord? That remains to be seen. Blackhurst approached the painting. His gray eyes fixed on the very spot where the hidden symbol had begun to emerge. That stroke, he said. It wasn't part of the original portrait. I know. Do you know what it is? Julieth measured his gaze. Do you? I might. Then speak plainly. Blackhurst studied her for a few seconds. Then walked to the tall window. His hands clasped behind his back. His posture rigid, almost military. My uncle, the former Earl of Blackmoor, was a man of many interests. Not all of them public. This painting belonged to a woman who knew him too well. The lady in the portrait? He nodded. And that symbol was part of her warning. A mark meant for those who knew how to read it. And what did it warn of? That silence can be bought. But art remembers everything. A chill ran down Julieth's spine. Are you trying to protect someone? I'm protecting a legacy. There are names that must not be tied to certain truths. She held his gaze. Truths like what? Blackhurst stepped closer. Like murder. Like political betrayal. Like ties to House Montrose itself. Julieth froze. That name thundered in her mind. She'd heard it before, in a whispered conversation between Isabella and Alexander. Months ago. And if her memory was right, it was also connected to an old letter Luciana had once burned. You know what this painting is hiding? She whispered. I know there are people who would kill for it. Then why let me restore it? Because you don't seem afraid. That makes you useful. For now. Blackhurst inclined his head slightly. And before leaving, said, be careful, Miss Cavendish. When art reveals what others tried to bury, it stops being a craft. And becomes a threat. That night, Julieth couldn't sleep. She sat in bed. Her notebook open. The symbol copied over and over. And one certainty pressing against her heart. Whatever that woman had tried to leave behind was not forgotten. It was waiting. And Julieth was beginning to open the wrong door. Or the right one. Moonlight spilled across the studio, silvering the covered canvases and the dust hanging in the air. It was late. Everyone slept, or pretended to. Julieth lit a small oil lamp, casting a golden halo over the room. Her heart still beat with the tension of the day. Can't sleep? The deep voice came from the doorway. She turned. Thorne stood there, no coat. No cravat. His shirt undone at the throat. He looked as tired as she felt. but his eyes burned with a quiet intensity that betrayed his calm. "This place brings me peace," she said softly. "It does for me too." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The wood creaked. And for a moment, the whole world seemed to hold its breath. "What was your life like before all this, Julieth?" She hesitated, then sat in an armchair, elbows on her knees, eyes on the floor. "My father was a minor noble. More name than fortune. We lived well, until the money stopped coming. My mother died. My sister was sent to work as a governess. I was left with an aunt, cold as winter. I grew up with rules, shame, and judgment. When she died, there was nothing left." Thorne sat across from her, silent. "Isabella wrote to me a year ago. Told me that if I ever felt like I was falling apart, I should come. I never imagined I would. Or that she'd welcome me with such love." "You've endured more than most," he said. She smiled faintly. "And you? What burdens do you carry in silence?" Thorne looked away, as if what he held back weighed too heavily on his tongue. "I was 17 when it happened. A fire at my uncle's estate, where I hid from my father, his expectations, his damn perfection. Everyone escaped. But I heard a child crying. I went back. Got him out, but the roof collapsed behind me." He stood, lit another lamp, and turned back to her. Without a word, he slowly unbuttoned his shirt. Under the warm light, his skin was revealed, scars winding down his side like ancient battle wounds. Rough and deep, seared into flesh. Julieth stood, never looking away. "My father never forgave me for ruining the family's image. I wasn't the heir, my older brother was. But when the Earl of Blackmoor, my mother's brother, died without an heir, the title came to me. A legal act, and a poisoned gift. I hid behind the title. The scandal. The silence." She stepped closer, now standing right before him. Her breath brushed his chest. "Those aren't scars. They're marks of courage," she whispered. Julieth raised a trembling hand and traced one of the old wounds with her fingertips. He closed his eyes. "Don't look at me like that," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't want your pity. I'm not giving you pity. I'm seeing you." Finally, silence fell between them, so thick it seemed to hum in the air. Thorne lifted his gaze. Their eyes met. And something in his expression, something raw, painfully human, shattered whatever walls still stood between them. "Sometimes I feel like my whole life has been a punishment," he said. "And then you appear. And for the first time, I wonder if maybe I deserve something more." Julieth didn't answer. Instead, she rose onto her toes and rested her forehead against his. Her hands, warm and small, pressed gently to his bare chest. He didn't move. "You're not alone anymore, Thorne." "Not anymore." Their lips barely brushed. A promise held back. A longing suspended in air. No words followed. Only the sound of two souls finally meeting. Thorne didn't know how it happened, but his arms wrapped around her naturally. She fit against him as if she'd always belonged there, her presence quieting the echoes of his past. Julieth said nothing more. Her silence was balm, not a barrier. And in that moment, among old scars and unspoken truths, they weren't earl or artist, not fugitives of the past. Just a man and a woman who had finally stopped running. The lamp flickered, and though there were no kisses, no promises, they both knew something had been set alight that night. Something that might just change everything. Even the things they had yet to understand. Chapter 7. Between shadows and glances. Rain pounded against the tall windows of the library. Thorne stood by the fireplace, leaning against the mantel, a glass in his hand. Julieth sat in an armchair, flipping through an old volume on heraldry. But her gaze was lost in the fire. "Can't sleep?" he asked, after watching her in silence for a long while. "Neither can you." Thorne took a sip and walked toward her. "May I ask what you're looking for with such determination?" "Symbolic references. Ancient coats of arms. Forgotten marks. Does it have to do with the symbol you found?" She looked at him calmly. "And if it does? Then I want to know." Julieth closed the book. "Thorne, there are things I can't tell you." "Not yet." He frowned. "Not yet? Not because I don't trust you," she added, "but because I still don't understand what I'm uncovering. And what if you're not the only one uncovering it?" She remained silent. Thorne took a step closer. "Last night I spoke with Blackhurst," he said softly. "He told me there are people who would kill for that painting." "And you believe him?" "I do, when it comes to warnings." She nodded slowly. "Then you understand why I need to tread carefully." "I understand," he said. "But I don't like that you're in the middle of something dangerous and I can't protect you." "And what if I don't need protection? We all need it at some point. Julieth. Even you." She lowered her gaze. And in that small gesture, her strength seemed to waver for the first time. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Not of the painting. Not of what it hides. But of discovering something I won't be able to ignore." Thorne knelt before her and took her hands. "You're not alone. You won't be. As long as I breathe." Julieth looked at him. And for a moment, the storm between them faded. He leaned in slowly. And when their lips met, there was no rush, only a silent promise. To remain. To protect. To burn together. If they had to. But just when the moment seemed inevitable, Julieth pulled away. "Not yet," she whispered. Thorne didn't insist. He only looked at her with that blend of desire and patience that made his presence impossible to resist. "I'll wait for you," he said. And with a final caress to her cheek, he left the library. Minutes later, Julieth pulled a small folded paper from her pocket. She had torn it from one of the Fairfax collection books during the evening with Lady Arabella. There it was again. The symbol, alongside a Latin inscription. Veritas sub pectorarde. The truth burns beneath the chest. Her heart pounded. Maybe she could no longer stop what had begun. And maybe she didn't want to. Chapter 8: The Price of Truth. The horse arrived covered in mud, snorting under the rain. The young messenger, soaked and shivering, asked to see the Earl immediately. Thorne met him at the main entrance, escorted by an armed footman. The boy barely lifted his gaze as he handed over a small sealed envelope. They told me not to speak. Just to deliver this. To you. And no one else." Thorne broke the seal. The paper was crumpled from the damp. But the writing was clear. Precise. Sharp. "Tell your restorer to stop digging. Art can kill too." No signature. Only a hand-drawn symbol at the bottom. The same one Julieth had found hidden in the painting. Hours later, in Thorne's study, "Are you sure no one else knows what you discovered?" Thorne asked, laying the letter on his desk. Julieth took a deep breath, trying to contain the mix of fear and fury churning inside her. "Only you. And I suppose, Blackhurst. Then someone is watching us. Or someone else already knew, and doesn't want us to confirm it. And what if the symbol isn't just a message? What if it's a code? A name? A secret order? Something used in conspiracies?" she said, finishing the thought. He nodded. Silence thickened between them. "Thorne," Julieth added softly, This goes beyond a painting. Someone protected this secret for generations. They hid it. Buried it under oil layers. Forged documents. Rumors, and now that it's coming to light, they're willing to kill for it. That night, at Rivington Hall, Isabella woke with a jolt. Alexander sat up instantly. What is it? I don't know. Something's wrong. I can feel it. Julieth, something's happened to her. Alexander lit the oil lamp. Do you want to send a letter? No. I want Rhys to find out. He knows Blackmoor better than anyone. And if my sister's truly in danger, I want someone close who fights like a demon. Alexander nodded. And for the first time in years, the shadow of a new scandal began to take shape in his mind. One that wouldn't just affect Blackmoor, but the entire aristocracy that thrived on secrets. Back at Blackmoor Hall, the next day, Julieth returned to the Grand Hall, determined to continue. It was no longer about the art. Not even about history. It was war. And she didn't intend to lose. But as she uncovered a new section of the painting, she found something unexpected. A face. Not in the main portrait, but hidden beneath a lower layer. Erased. Intentionally blurred. A man. And not just any man. Julieth froze. Because she knew that face. And if it was there, everything she thought she understood was about to shatter. Chapter 9 Faces from the Past. The morning light barely filtered through the curtains when Julieth, her fingers stained with pigment, took a step back. It can't be, she whispered. There it was. Beneath layers of old oil and varnish. A hidden face. Deliberately erased. But now visible. And familiar. Dark hair. A sharp jaw. An arrogant expression. Julieth recognized that face, not from official portraits, but from an old political caricature kept in the library at Rivington Hall. Lord Henry Clarendon. A member of Parliament. A member of the National Protection Society. And a known ally of Lord Faircroft. Good God, a hand touched her shoulder, making her turn with a start. Easy, said a deep voice. Julieth blinked. Rhys? Rhys Ashford, Viscount of Ashbury, stood before her, soaked from travel but as commanding as ever. Isabella asked me to come, he explained. She said things were being kept from you, and that she doesn't trust Blackhurst. She could only nod, still processing what she had uncovered. Is that Lord Clarendon? He asked, stepping closer to the painting. Yes. Julieth whispered. He was painted, then erased. Hidden for years. And that woman? The first Countess of Blackmoor. No one knows what happened to her. She's not even buried here. But now I suspect she knew too much. And she left it in the painting as a warning. Rhys fell silent. This isn't just an artistic discovery anymore. If Lord Clarendon is tied to a missing woman, and to the Montrose symbol, then we're sitting on a bomb. Julieth said. Rhys nodded. We need to act before they do. She looked up. Do you think it's too late? Rhys looked at her with the grim expression of a man who'd seen the battlefield. At this point, they've already seen us. That afternoon, in the halls of Blackmoor Hall, a maid whispered in the kitchen. A footman who was never around, now appeared at every corner. And Blackhurst had vanished. Thorne gathered Julieth and Rhys in his study. No one's explained anything yet. But I just received a letter sealed by the Home Office. It wasn't addressed to me, but to my uncle. How is that possible? Rhys opened the envelope with a desk dagger. The message was brief. What your family buried must not be unearthed. Loyalty has a price. And some legacies must remain untouched, even if they're stained with blood. Rhys exchanged a look with Thorne. This isn't just a warning. It's a declaration of war. Final scene of the chapter. In a grand house in London. An elegant man with perfectly combed grey hair held a portrait in his hands. It was the original sketch of the face Julieth had just uncovered. And between his fingers, he spun a ring bearing the hidden symbol from the painting. "Miss Cavendish?" he asked his companion, never taking his eyes off the artwork. "Yes, my lord. The restorer. Then we have a problem." His smile was ice cold. And problems must be corrected. Chapter 10: The Attack. The scent of linseed oil and fresh pigment still lingered in the air when Julieth stepped into the studio at dawn. She was barefoot, her hair loose, wrapped in the old robe she used for painting. The outside world felt distant, irrelevant. There was only the work, the painting, the mystery, and the symbol. That damned symbol watching her from the corner of the canvas. She reached for the solvent jar, as she did every morning, to work on the layer covering the lower section of the portrait. But something was wrong. The smell. It wasn't the same. She brought the jar to her nose, and her body reacted before her mind could. A burning sensation tore through her throat. She coughed, stumbled back, and the jar slipped from her hands, shattering on the floor. Damn it. She covered her mouth with the sleeve of her robe. Her eyes watered, but she still managed to see the liquid bubbling over the wood. It wasn't solvent. It was acid. Someone was trying to destroy the painting. Or something worse. The door burst open. "Julieth!" Thorne shouted. She barely looked up before he wrapped her in his coat, swept her into his arms, and carried her out of the room. Minutes later, in the library, "Are you all right?" he asked, leaning over her, his brow furrowed. I think so," she murmured. "The jar. It was different. Not the one I left last night." Thorne sprang to his feet, pacing the room, giving sharp orders. He demanded the studio be sealed, every servant located, every entrance checked. "This wasn't an accident." "I know," she said, her lips still burning, her hands still shaking. "And what scares me most isn't that they tried to ruin the painting, but that they knew exactly which jar I would use." Thorne turned toward her. They're inside the house. Hours later, Rhys arrived with a hardened face. He had ridden through the night after receiving Thorne's message. "This is no longer a veiled threat," he declared. "It's an attempt to silence her." "Did anyone else know you'd uncovered a new face?" "Just you, Thorne, and me," Julieth replied. "And maybe someone who's been watching us far longer than we thought." Rhys dropped a crumpled piece of paper onto the table. "We intercepted this in London. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but it mentions a restorer, a compromised painting, and a woman who must disappear." Thorne read it, his jaw clenched. "Who sent it?" Rhys shook his head. "It's sealed with the symbol, and signed with 2 initials. E. M. Montclair." Thorne muttered. Julieth looked up, pale. "Montclair? Lord Ashcroft Montclair," Rhys explained. "One of the most respected men in Parliament. An ally of Clarendon. And, apparently, heir to the circle that protected the Montrose family's secrets for generations." "What's his connection to the painting?" "I don't know yet. But his name appears in the property records of an old estate in Devonshire." Thorne looked at her instantly. "The place where your mother painted her final work." That night, Julieth couldn't sleep. The fire in her chest wasn't just fear. It was rage, helplessness, and longing. Thorne found her sitting on the terrace, hugging her knees. "Do you want me to stay with you?" "What if I said yes?" she whispered, not looking at him. "Then I'd stay until morning. Or until it all burns down." She lifted her face. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy. Tense. Charged. I can't promise we'll come out of this unharmed, he said, standing close. I don't want easy. I just want you. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. But his hand covered hers. Steady yet trembling inside. And that unspoken promise was more intimate than any touch. Chapter 11. The Ghost Studio. The fields of Devonshire stretched like a muted velvet carpet beneath a leaden sky. Julieth watched through the carriage window, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Beside her, Thorne remained silent, though his gaze never left her profile. Do you recognize it? He asked, nodding toward the house on the horizon. She nodded slowly. I lived here when I was 8 or 9. My mother was invited to paint a series of portraits. But there was something strange. She never spoke of that time, and after that stay, she never painted for the aristocracy again. Did you ever know who her patron was? No, she replied. Only that the payment was generous and discreet, and that we left overnight, without saying goodbye to anyone. The house stood like an elegant skeleton, abandoned for more than a decade. Yet the lock yielded easily to a single old key. Inside, dust had not fully erased the traces of the past. Thorne lit a lamp. The flickering glow fell on veiled portraits, stacked canvases, and a door at the back. A door painted the same color as the wall, nearly invisible. Julieth approached, her heart pounding against her ribs. She turned the handle. The air on the other side smelled of dry pigment, of neglect, of long-forgotten secrets. It was her studio, she whispered. Inside the studio, sketches were pinned to the walls. Patches of color. Fragments of faces. And at the far end, half covered by a sheet, the mural. Julieth pulled the fabric away with trembling hands. What emerged stole their breath. It was a symbolic scene. A blindfolded woman held a scale in one hand, and a bloodied paintbrush in the other. Behind her, 3 faceless figures in robes, barely hiding embroidered symbols. That's the emblem of the Society for National Safeguard, Thorne murmured. And here, Julieth pointed to a corner. This face, it's Clarendon. The image had been painted and then blurred. But the facial structure, the tight lips, it was unmistakable. And this one here, she added, brushing a nearly hidden profile. That's not Clarendon. It's another man, with a scar on his cheek and a ring bearing the same symbol. Thorne narrowed his eyes. Montclair. She painted them all. She knew what they were doing. Maybe she was forced to, or maybe she used it as a warning. At the bottom edge, a signature. A. Cavendish. And beside it, tiny letters etched with a metal point. If they silence me, let the art speak for me. Julieth swallowed hard. Her eyes filled with tears. Mother. Thorne placed a hand on her back. His gesture was protective, intimate, deep. This mural is more than art, he said. It's evidence. A visual accusation. If we bring it to light, Montclair won't be able to deny what he was. And if he tries to silence me like he did her? Thorne lifted his head. His expression was made of steel. Then he'll have to kill me first. That night, in the abandoned house, the fireplace cast a faint glow across the room. The air was heavy with unspoken emotion. Julieth and Thorne sat together in silence, staring into the flames, until she finally spoke. Thank you for believing me. For taking the risk. What other choice did I have? He answered. Since you came into my life, everything that once felt certain has become unbearable. She looked up at him. She wanted him, needed him, and she had no strength left to resist. Don't tell me you don't want me. Thorne. Not tonight. He said nothing. He just cupped her face and kissed her. Fiercely. Urgently. As if he had waited for her long before he ever met her. That night wasn't about restraint. It was about promise. Of love. Of war. Of everything that was yet to come. And of the unshakable truth that neither art nor danger could break what was already bound together. Chapter 12 The Cost of Truth. Dawn found Julieth sitting in front of the mural. Wrapped in a blanket. Her gaze fixed on the faces of those who had pulled the strings of power from the shadows. Thorne slept in a nearby armchair. Still fully dressed. As if unwilling to let his guard down even in his sleep. She approached the mural. A lit candle in her hand. There were details she hadn't seen the night before. Insignias. Tiny figures hidden within the folds of the robes. A crossed-out crest. A broken quill. And in the lower right corner, a small golden symbol. Nearly erased by time. It was the same one she had seen on the letter Isabella kept. The same symbol that appeared on the secret documents Luciana had once received. A mark shared by all the enemies she now understood were part of something much larger. The same symbol burned into her family's history. This isn't just about Montclair. She whispered. I know. Thorne said. Already awake and watching her. But he's the face the world will see. The rest will fall after. Julieth nodded. We have to move the mural. Protect it. And make it public. He added. But not yet. We have to be ready for their response. In London. Days later, you want to move a 4-meter painting in the middle of the season? Rhys exclaimed. Stunned. We don't have a choice. Thorne replied. If we don't move it, they'll find it. They already tried to destroy it with acid, they'll try again. Rhys turned to Isabella, who remained silent. What do you think? I think Montclair already knows we've uncovered his secret. He knew the moment he tried to silence Julieth. The question isn't if he'll act. It's when. Rhys nodded. Then we'd better be ready. That night, the carriage traveled a back road. Far from the main routes. Thorne had hired the best men to protect the mural, which had been carefully dismantled and secured in sealed compartments. But halfway through the journey, the silence of the forest shattered. A gunshot. Then another. The horses shrieked. The carriage came to a halt. Ambush. One of the guards shouted. Thorne threw open the door. Julieth stood immediately. But he placed a firm hand on her shoulder. Stay inside. Thorne. Trust me. She obeyed, but only for a few seconds. Outside, the shots ceased. And then, a voice. Hand over the artwork. Or we'll pick up the pieces. Julieth peeked through the side panel. Shadows moved between the trees. One of the attackers wore a cloak with a golden symbol embroidered on it. The symbol. This isn't just a robbery. Julieth shouted from inside the carriage. They're after us. The man leading the ambush turned at the sound of her voice. So the young lady is here. Run. Thorne yelled. Chaos erupted. Gunfire. Screams. Horses rearing. Julieth opened the opposite door and leapt out just as a bullet struck where she had been moments earlier. She hit the ground, rolled, and rose running. And then she felt Thorne's hand close around her arm. Did you really think I'd leave you now? She smiled, tears brimming in her eyes. Only if you promise never to leave me again. Damn it. Julieth. He murmured. And kissed her, right there. Beneath the smoke. The fear. And the open sky. Hours later. At Isabella's estate, the mural was safe. The attackers. Scattered. But the war had only just begun. Montclair has made his first move, Rhys said. It's time we make ours. Isabella approached with an envelope in hand. This arrived this morning. No return address, but the seal is old. Very old. Julieth took it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. The truth is painted, but the blood has yet to be washed away. If you seek answers, go to where the original portrait began. E. B. Who's E. B? Julieth asked. Thorne and Rhys exchanged a look. They both knew. Elias Blackthorne, they said in unison. Chapter 13. Beneath the surface. Outside. The rain fell as if the sky itself sensed something was about to break. Julieth couldn't sleep. From her corner in the study, she stared at the restored mural. Her eyes tired but burning. The faded face of Cassandra Montrose seemed to meet her gaze, as if aware she'd been discovered, and that such discovery would come at a cost. The background figures were now clear. 3 men. One unmistakably Lord Clarendon. And another, marked by a distinct scar, exactly who Julieth had suspected for days. Montclair. But there was more. There was a gap. A figure without a face. Someone not fully painted, or perhaps deliberately erased. And there, in the bottom right corner of the canvas, Julieth saw what looked like a mark carved with a blade. Not painted with a brush. A symbol. She'd seen it before. Not in books, but in the papers Isabella and Rhys kept under lock and key. In the coded notes Luciana had received before she was threatened. And in the ring Thorne had taken from the hand of the man who had tried to infiltrate his estate 2 nights earlier. You're thinking too loud again, said Thorne from the doorway. She wasn't surprised. She knew he would come. I've confirmed what I feared. Cassandra didn't just leave this mural as a denunciation, she meant it as a warning. The symbol appears 3 times. Once in her signature. Again beside Clarendon's face. And one more, hidden in the shadows of the incomplete figure. Thorne stepped closer. And what does the symbol represent? That's the worst part, she murmured. I don't know if it marks an enemy, or a traitor who was eliminated for knowing too much. Hours later, in the Blackmoor Hall library, Isabella leafed through a thick, worn leather-bound book. Rhys stood near the window, watching the road as if expecting someone, or something, to appear. The symbol belongs to a society that was officially dissolved, Isabella explained. The Brotherhood of the Quill and the Silence. Founded in the 18th century as a political watchdog group. Later absorbed by the darker corners of Parliament. They guarded secrets, protected archives, covered scandals, and eliminated threats. What if Cassandra was one of them? Julieth asked. Or worse, said Rhys. What if she tried to destroy them from the inside? Thorne frowned. That would explain why she was silenced. And why they're now trying to erase this mural before the truth comes out. Julieth closed her eyes for a moment. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her. She was the restorer. The unwilling heir to a message. The last voice of a woman who died knowing her art could topple empires. We have to move it out of here, she said at last. Thorne looked at her. Are you sure? More than ever. The question is, where? Later. In the map room, Luciana suggested the old chapel on the Ashbury estate, an abandoned building between cliffs and forest. Rhys agreed. Isabella offered resources and decoy routes to mislead any pursuers. As they mapped out the plan, an unexpected message arrived. A note. Handwritten and sealed with black wax. It read, "The truth still sleeps in the crypt of its origin. Seek where the first stroke was ordered. Not inspired. E. B. Julieth read the initials in silence. Thorne barely whispered. Elias Blackthorne. That night. In the study, Thorne and Julieth were alone with the mural. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes fixed on the incomplete figure. What do you see there? He asked. A face that hasn't been revealed yet. But I know, it's the one behind everything. Do you think your mother knew? I'm certain. And the mural? Isabella asked, stepping into the room. Thorne nodded. It's here. We moved it in 3 sections, it's stored in the West Wing gallery. No one can access it without my permission. And if they come looking, they won't know it exists. Everyone's focused on the painting. But the mural, he looked at Julieth, is the piece of the puzzle we haven't solved yet. She nodded, her voice tight with emotion. There lies the unfinished figure. Cassandra left us a face without features. And I believe that once we reveal it, everything will make sense. Thorne studied her in silence. If we go all the way, are you ready to take the risk? Are you? For you, yes. There was no kiss. No caress. Just the shared weight of fear and the certainty that, together, they were no longer scattered pieces of a forgotten game, but a real threat to those who had thrived in impunity for far too long. Chapter 14: The Echo of Those Who Still Watch. The carriage moved slowly down a barely traveled path, surrounded by trees that seemed to lean in to listen. The old chapel of Whitcroft was just 30 minutes away. Yet the air had grown heavier with every passing mile. Julieth held the painting, wrapped in thick cloth. The mural, divided into sections, had been transported separately 2 days earlier under the pretext of a historical restoration. Thorne sat beside her. They said nothing. The tension was as palpable as the cold seeping through the cracks. When they finally arrived, the chapel emerged from the mist, stone covered in moss. Shattered stained glass. Centuries of silence. No one would have imagined that this forgotten place would become the refuge for a truth capable of bringing down powerful men. The trusted servants, handpicked by Isabella, unloaded the crates in silence. The order had been clear. No one was to know what they carried. Julieth walked between the stone pews as if stepping onto sacred ground. And in a way, it was. No one will dare look for us here, Thorne said, organizing the final security measures. But that doesn't mean we're safe. She nodded. What if they already know? Then they'll get here too late. Days later, at Blackmoor Hall, Lady Arabella Brentshire entered the drawing room as if she still owned the place. Dressed in mourning, but with a wicked glint in her eyes, she approached Isabella with a rehearsed smile. My dear Duchess, how long it has been since our last conversation. And yet, not nearly long enough, Isabella replied with a frozen smile. Arabella let out a false laugh. I've heard the most curious rumors about young Miss Cavendish. Very particular. Aren't you worried such company might stain your family's reputation? My family has no fear of the truth, Isabella said. Only those with something to lose feel the need to hide it. Arabella raised a brow. We all have something to lose. Darling. That same night, a man arrived at the Blackmoor Hall stables. He didn't give his name. He simply handed over a letter sealed with the Blackthorn crest. When the butler brought it to Thorne, his expression darkened. Who delivered it? He claimed to be family. My lord. Very confident. He left before I could stop him. Thorne broke the seal. Inside, a brief message. Did you think you could keep what doesn't belong to you? The title. The land. The truth. I will reclaim what is mine. L.B. Thorne clenched his jaw. My cousin. Meanwhile, at the chapel, Julieth lit an oil lamp. The mural, still in fragments, was slowly being reassembled at the altar. She had worked tirelessly, fitting pieces back together, cleaning strokes with trembling hands. And at last, as she slid away a layer of aged varnish, a shape began to emerge. A figure in the shadows. A silhouette hidden in the darkest part of the mural. But this time, she wasn't alone. 2 letters. Small. Discreet. E. B. Julieth stepped back. Her heart pounded. Elias. And next to that signature, a newer stroke. Another message. She wasn't the one who betrayed. It was the one who forced her to paint the truth. The echo of truth reverberated through the forgotten chapel walls. And Julieth knew, the unfinished face, the nameless figure, still had much to reveal. Chapter 14. The echo of those still watching. The carriage moved along a barely used path, surrounded by trees that seemed to lean in to listen. The old Whitcroft Chapel was only half an hour away. Yet the air had grown heavier with each passing mile. Julieth held the painting tightly, wrapped in thick cloth. The mural, divided into sections, had been transported separately 2 days earlier under the pretense of historical restoration. Thorne sat beside her. They didn't speak. The tension was as thick as the cold seeping through the cracks. When they finally arrived, the chapel emerged through the mist. Moss-covered stone, shattered stained glass, and centuries of silence. No one would ever imagine that such a forgotten place could hide a truth powerful enough to bring down more than one man of influence. The trusted servants, handpicked by Isabella, unloaded the crates in silence. The instructions had been clear. No one was to know what they carried. Julieth walked between the stone pews as if stepping on sacred ground. And in a way, it was. No one will dare look for us here, Thorne said as he gave final orders for their protection. But that doesn't mean we're safe. She nodded. What if they already know? Then they'll arrive too late. Days later, at Blackmoor Hall, Lady Arabella Brentshire entered the drawing room as if she still owned the place. Dressed in mourning, but with a wicked gleam in her eyes, she approached Isabella with a rehearsed smile. My dear Duchess, it's been far too long since our last conversation. And yet not long enough. Isabella replied with a cold smile. Arabella let out a false laugh. I've heard some curious rumors about young Miss Cavendish. Quite peculiar. Aren't you worried that certain company might tarnish your family's reputation? My family does not fear the truth, Isabella said calmly. Only those with something to lose try to hide it. Arabella raised a brow. We all have something to lose. Darling. That very night, a man arrived at the Blackmoor stables. He gave no name, just handed over a letter sealed with the Blackthorne family crest. When the butler delivered it to Thorne, the Viscount's expression turned grim. Who left this? He claimed to be family. My lord. Spoke with great certainty. Left before I could stop him. Thorne broke the seal. Inside was a short message. Did you truly think you could keep what isn't yours? The title. The land. The truth. I will reclaim what belongs to me. L.B. Thorne clenched his jaw. My cousin. Meanwhile, at the chapel, Julieth lit an oil lamp. The mural, still in pieces, was slowly being rebuilt at the altar. She had worked tirelessly, reassembling fragments, cleaning brush strokes with trembling hands. And finally, as she brushed away a layer of aged varnish, a shape began to emerge. A shadowy figure, a silhouette hidden in the darkest part of the mural. But this time, she wasn't alone. 2 letters. Small. Subtle. E. B. Julieth stepped back. Her heart pounded in her chest. Elias. And beside that signature, a newer line. Another message. The betrayal wasn't hers. It came from the one who forced her to paint the truth. The echo of that truth rang through the forgotten walls of the chapel. And Julieth knew, the incomplete face. The nameless figure still had much left to say. Chapter 16, Where the Truth Hurts. The news exploded in London like a match to dry gunpowder. At dawn, the special edition of the Parliament Gazette was delivered to every political club, magistrate's office, and the breakfast tables of the most influential ladies. On the front page, an image of a fragmented painting, accompanied by a headline that read, Art reveals what politics silences. A lost mural, a forgotten signature, and a web of power. Betrayal and blood. Names were not yet printed. But they weren't needed. The faces were there. The symbols. The connections. Clarendon. Montclair. And a third. Still incomplete. That morning, Julieth awoke to the sound of hooves outside the chapel. Thorne was already dressed. Sword at his side and fire in his eyes. Who is it? She asked. He cracked the door and looked through the trees. No one on our side. 2 men on horseback dismounted. Inspecting the perimeter. One of them pulled out a scroll. What are they looking for? Julieth whispered. A legal excuse to break in. Probably a forged seizure warrant. He replied. Her heart raced. What do we do? You stay back. I'll speak to them. But Julieth stepped forward, stopping him with her hand. No. This time. I'm coming too. At the chapel's entrance. On what authority do you come to this property? Thorne asked firmly. We have reason to believe a stolen artifact of historical value is being concealed here. One man replied, holding up the document. It's also suspected to contain defamatory elements targeting members of Parliament. Julieth raised her chin. Since when is a restorer accused of conspiracy for working with old paintings? The men exchanged glances. They hesitated. That's when a third figure emerged from the road. Tall. Cloaked in black. Dark hair. Cold stare. I didn't know truth needed permission to come to light. He said in a deep voice. Thorne recognized him instantly. Elias. His younger brother. The one who had returned from the dead. The one who had lived in the shadows and knew too much. What are you doing here? Elias pulled a parchment from his coat and handed it over. A protection order from the Internal Council for Historical Archives. I've filed the mural as endangered heritage art. No one can touch it without an official investigation. The men turned pale. One stowed the document and left immediately. The other followed. Thorne lowered his guard. Julieth stared at Elias in silence. Who exactly are you? He gave a slight smile. Someone who has seen men die protecting truths others tried to bury with ink. Fire and blood. And someone who won't let that happen again. Hours later. Inside the chapel. Why now? Thorne asked. Why show up today? Because now they're desperate. Elias said, leaning against a column. And when the enemy gets desperate, that's when they make mistakes. Montclair met with Arabella. Your cousin traveled north. They're planning to act before the next part of the mural is revealed. Julieth placed the final restored plaster fragment onto the easel. One stroke connected with another, and at last, the incomplete figure started to form a face. It wasn't Clarendon. Nor Montclair. It was the very artist who signed the Parliament's restoration contracts. The same man who, years ago, was accused of forging war portraits. They forced him to paint what Cassandra was trying to expose. Julieth said, "He was the hand, not the mastermind. Just another link in the chain." Elias stepped closer. "And behind him lies the real signature." The pressure mounted. The mural was speaking. And the end could no longer be avoided. Chapter 17: The Face Behind the Veil. The gallery in the west wing of Blackmoor Hall was shrouded in shadow. The curtains were drawn. The lamps unlit. And the mural untouched. Safe. Julieth walked between the wooden frames as if crossing a silent chapel. Dust barely stirred under her steps. Elias followed in silence. Thorne stood behind them, securing the door. "It was here all this time," Elias whispered, his gaze tracing every stroke, every layer of cracked paint. "It's the only piece that wasn't signed by either Cassandra or the original artist," Julieth said. "That's what made me suspect it had been altered. Forced." Elias leaned toward a corner of the canvas. "Here it is." A faint line embedded between dark pigments. Almost invisible. "It's the seal of the Silent Committee," he confirmed. "Only the founding members could sign like this. And one of them is still alive." A chill ran through Julieth's spine. "Who?" Elias turned to her. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Lord Everhart." Thorne frowned. "The father of the current minister?" "No. His older brother. The one they claimed was exiled due to illness. In truth, he was the one who designed the plan to censor Cassandra. And the one who directed the painter as a pawn." Julieth stepped closer to the mural. And there, beneath layers of aged varnish, a face began to emerge. Not the usual image of power. It was a man with a calm smile and hollow eyes. The expression of someone who knew too much and feared no one who dared to stop him. Elias confirmed. "It's him." Hours later, in the main hall of Blackmoor Hall, Rhys, Isabella, and Luciana listened in silence. "So it was all orchestrated by Everhart," Rhys summarized. "Clarendon and Montclair were just useful pawns." "Exactly." Elias nodded. "And now that both the painting and the mural are complete, we have enough to expose him. But it's not enough to simply show it. We must do it in a way they can't silence." Luciana looked at Isabella. "What if we present it at the winter exhibition of the Historical Society? The event is broadcast and archived for Parliament. They couldn't censor it without drawing attention." Isabella nodded. "And if we present it as a restored archival discovery, they won't be able to reject it." Thorne looked up. "How much time do we need to finish the restoration and prepare the exhibition?" 3 days, Julieth said. "If I work without pause." Elias smiled, a spark of pride lighting his features for the first time. "Then let the colors speak. And let Parliament tremble." That night, while everyone slept, a figure slipped through the hedges of Blackmoor Hall. The widow Arabella, dressed in shadows, cloaked in grey. She wasn't alone. "If we're going to lose the game," she whispered to Thorne's cousin, "we might as well burn the board." And while Julieth slept beside the half-mounted mural, a spark landed on a canvas. And the fire began to burn. Chapter 18: Fire and Ashes. Julieth was the first to notice it. The smell. Not fresh smoke, but scorched fabric, wood blistered by flames. She sat up abruptly, her eyes stinging from the burning air. Around her, the West Wing gallery was filling with a dense gray haze. She stood on shaky legs. And then she saw it. Flames were climbing one corner of the mural. The canvas curled, heat warping the still wet paint. "No!" she cried, heart in her throat. Running toward it, she grabbed a bucket of water, a blanket, Anything. She called out. Screamed. The gallery groaned with an inhuman crackle. The door burst open. Julieth. It was Thorne. He stormed through the smoke like a hurricane, pulled her into his arms, and dragged her away just as part of the frame collapsed. The mural. We can't lose it. She sobbed, struggling to break free. You matter more. He roared. Rhys and Luciana arrived with buckets. Isabella came in behind them with the servants. The fire wasn't yet uncontrollable, but it was spreading fast. Every second counted. Elias burst in from the opposite side, shielding his face. The center. Protect the center. That's where the signature is. Together, they managed to extinguish the flames before they reached the mural's core. But the edges, the parts framing Everhart's face, burned without mercy. When silence returned, the gallery smelled of smoke and unshed tears. Covered in ash, Julieth knelt before what remained of her work. Her hands trembled. It's gone. Thorne knelt beside her. Not all of it. Look. The central section was intact. The hidden signature. The symbol. Cassandra's gaze. We still have what matters. He whispered. And we'll make it speak. Hours later, Elias paced the library. That wasn't an accident. It was her. Arabella. And your cousin. No doubt. Thorne nodded, his knuckles still white. The worst part is, we have no proof they were here tonight. No footprints. No witnesses. Then, Isabella said, we turned the attempt into an advantage. How? Julieth asked. Drained. The mural is no longer just a restoration. It's a surviving testimony of sabotage. If we present it that way, as a piece someone tried to destroy right before its unveiling, Parliament won't be able to ignore it without looking suspicious. Elias folded his arms. She's right. The scandal will be twice as loud. And no one will be able to bury it without raising even more questions. Julieth took a long breath. Her reddened eyes found thorns. Then, let the fire be part of the painting. Let's finish what we started. Chapter 19. What burns cannot be erased. The Winter Hall of the Historical Society was packed. Elegant ladies. Men with sharp eyes and even sharper tongues. Politicians. Patrons. Art critics. Society columnists. All waited in anticipation. A rumor had spread. A lost painting had been restored. And with it, a secret. Julieth stood behind the stage. Her fingers clenched against her skirt. Thorne was beside her, brow tense. Isabella and Rhys were among the crowd. Luciana too. And Elias. In the upper gallery. Watched from the shadows. The curator of the exhibit announced solemnly. Tonight. A piece that survived time. And fire. A restoration led by Miss Julieth Cavendish. And perhaps one of the most unsettling testimonies of our recent history. The curtains opened. And the mural, its edges scorched by flames, was revealed to the world. Gasps erupted immediately. Surprise. Confusion. Fascination. Julieth stepped forward. This piece was found among the ruins of Cassandra Montrose's old studio. Her signature is not at the bottom, but hidden beneath layers that time and fear tried to bury. She pointed to the center of the mural. Here. And here, the symbol of the Silent Committee. A network that operated from the shadows to protect certain secrets, and silence those who tried to expose them. The room held its breath. Cassandra did not die in an accident. She was silenced. And her testimony lives here. Then a voice rose from the crowd. Lies. Slander. This woman is nothing but a fraud. Arabella. Radiant. Cold. Poison disguised as scandal. At her side, Lord Blackhurst. That mural was altered. It's a forgery. The murmur turned tense. All eyes shifted to the gallery. Elias stepped forward. I personally reviewed the materials. The signatures. The pigments. This piece is authentic. And it was protected under a legal mandate by the Council of Historical Archives. Arabella turned pale. Julieth remained unmoved. I am not a fraud. I am the voice you failed to silence. And this work is proof of what you tried to destroy. Applause burst from the right wing. Then another. And another. Until the entire hall erupted in ovation. Arabella and Blackhurst left under a wave of boos. Their faces crumbling. The curtain fell. But not the silence. Because the truth could no longer be silenced. Hours later. On a balcony overlooking the hall, Julieth gazed out at the city. Her eyes still shining. Thorne approached. You did it. She shook her head softly. We did. He took her hand. Now everyone knows the truth. There are no more shadows to hide them. No, she said with a tired smile. But we still have to decide what to do with the light. Thorne leaned in. I just know I don't want to step away from it. Or from you. And he kissed her. Not like a man full of gratitude. But like one who had finally found his home. Aquí tienes la traducción del epílogo optimizada para audiolibro en inglés con voz. Manteniendo el tono emocional. El estilo narrativo y adaptando términos para naturalidad y fluidez en el idioma. Epilogue, Among Ruins and Roots. The Earl and the Untamed, Book 3. 1 month later, spring had arrived at Blackmoor Hall. The trees had turned green again. The fountains flowed once more. And in the west wing, where there had once been smoke and ashes, now there were fresh canvases, clean easels, and light. Julieth was painting. Not a hidden mural. Not a cry for justice disguised as a landscape. She painted flowers. Skies. The profile of a man who once believed he didn't deserve to be loved. Thorne sat beside her, holding a book. But truth be told, he hadn't read a single word. He was watching her. Her hands. Her mouth. Her soul. Do you know what I miss? He asked. The fire? The threats? Parliament up in arms? He laughed. Your studio. Full of chaos. She raised an eyebrow. Are you saying you miss the mess? I'm saying I miss you, the way you were when you still tried to resist me. Julieth smiled. Eyes fixed on the canvas. Give me a few hours. I can be insufferable again. Thorne stood and walked over to her. No. I like you better this way. In command of your space, and of my heart. She looked at him. And said nothing. Because she had already painted it all. Meanwhile, somewhere in the south of France, the inn was small, discreet. Up on the hill, the ruins of an ivy-covered monastery hid passages that appeared on no map. Elias Blackthorne was writing by hand in an old notebook. Beside a glass of wine he barely touched. He had returned to England for a reason. But it wasn't the first time he carried secrets. A woman approached down the corridor. Braided hair. Sharp eyes. She carried a bundle wrapped in cloth, and a dagger hidden under her skirt. Any word from the Duke? She asked. None. Which is a good sign. She sat in front of him. So, we leave tomorrow? Elias closed the notebook. Yes. But this time, we tread carefully. Those who played in the shadows haven't vanished. They've just changed their positions on the board. She looked at him with intensity. Elias, do you trust me? He studied her in silence. Then, very slowly, he nodded. I don't have a choice. You stole the map, and my heart. She smiled. And in the distance, a bell rang 3 times. The signal. Elias rose to his feet. It's time. And together, they vanished into the shadows, toward a past yet to be told. End of Book 3, The Earl and the Untamed. Coming soon, the return of a man marked by silence, and of the woman who swore never to trust again. Book 4, The Duke's Brother. Only on Whispers by Maga Audiobooks. Thank you for joining me in this beautiful story. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did sharing it with you. If you liked it, I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Whispers by Maga Audiobooks, so you don't miss a single one of my upcoming releases. Until next time, and may the magic always be with you.